Oh, hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Tier 7 German premium Weimar. I'm going to be comparing it quite extensively with the München because, well, it is a light cruiser and comparing it to the York just doesn't really fit. The Weimar is a ship that has gone through a lot of iterations. It started out having completely broken HE DPM in testing phase. They gave it a 5-second reload, and then they kind of went completely insane on the reload and nerfed it down to 8 seconds, which actually gives it worse DPM than the München, even though this thing actually has 12 150mm guns compared to München's 8. But I'll get into more of that later on. The ship is, well, it has a fair bit of gimmicks. The default speed on the ship isn't actually that impressive. It does 32.6 knots compared to München's 37.8. However, the Weimar does have access to speed boost, which does bump up that speed to 37.5 because it's a 15% speed boost. And if you build fully for the speed boost, as I have done here and as I recommend, well, you can truck along at 37.5 knots for a bit more than 4 minutes. I think it's 4 minutes 17 seconds if you fully build for the consumable, and then you have about, what, 85 seconds of cooldown where you're in trouble, and then it's back to the normal. So very reliant on the speed boost consumable to gain that advantage. I am building acceleration, which is also why when I turn left here and then I try to cancel my turn to dodge the Colorado shells, well, 8.8 second default rudder shift means that even when I see the shells and try to cancel the turn, I have absolutely no chance of doing so, and I end up eating some citadel damage. However, the Weimar did survive it, whereas something like a München would probably just straight up have exploded there. And the reason for that is that the Weimar actually gets the York hull, which means that the Citadel is significantly lower than München's. München has this huge bump in the Citadel that elevates it quite a bit over the water, whereas the Weimar has a flat, straight Citadel. It gets the York's turtleback, which is of questionable value, as the ship can still be citadeled quite easily. But more importantly, it gets 25mm upper belt plating. 25 is quite important because the München gets 20. And the difference between 20 and 25mm is that 25mm is enough to bounce 356mm guns, and if considering at tier 7 you face a lot of tier 6s, tier 7s that run 356mm guns, this is a pretty important advantage because it means angling your ship is quite a bit more effective in the Weimar than it is in München. The torpedo angles, as you can see, are fantastic, and unlike the München that has 2x4, aka 8 torpedoes, you have 4x3 for a total of 12 torpedoes. And this combined with the good firing angles makes the München a very effective YOLOing ship, especially with speed boost active, and against ships like Leon that really just can't overmatch that upper belt plating. This ship doesn't really do, well, it does okay when up tiered, but especially against same tiers and lower tiers, aka tier 7 ranked, is where I've just enjoyed this ship the most, and yeah, I've just been having a lot of fun in it, honestly, in tier 7 ranked. There are some other differences, for example this full broadside Trento at 11 km, well, not full, he is a bit angled, but I see him turning in. Gets caught by surprise and eats about like 17,000-18,000 AP damage. And as you can probably tell from the arcs, there are some other differences between these guns and the other 150mm guns in the game. Whereas München guns are quite floaty and have quite poor penetration. In fact, München penetration is roughly on the level of the Nürnberg. The Weimar actually has a penetration roughly on the level of the Mainz, the tier 8 German premium. This means that obviously, well, you can basically smash any cruiser that gives you broadside. There are some exceptions like a Mayoko sitting far enough away. These are some fairly tanky cruisers, but basically anything slightly lighter and you have no issues whatsoever citadeling them across the map. So the AP performance is very, very good. The shell velocity on the other hand is a bit wonky. I mentioned that it has the penetration of the Mainz AP, but it actually has the shell velocity of the Nürnberg, which is a bit weird, but that's just the way it works. It's still far better than München's. Of course, München has the worst shell velocity of all these 150s that we're talking about, and München's shells are quite floaty because of that. So that is the advantage Weimar has, is that the gun performance is just better. It does pay for this gun performance though in various ways. Well, namely, of course, the DPM is a bit worse. Even though the Weimar has more guns, the München just reloads far faster, which means it pumps out more AP DPM, it pumps out more HE DPM, it starts more fires, all the things that comes with throwing more shells at the enemy. The other big talking point is, of course, the range. Weimar has a 14 km base range, and 14 kilometers is garbage. When you compare it to the München, that sits at, well, a pretty comfortable, I would say, 16.6 km range, this thing has 14 kilometers. But then it has, well, you guessed it, a wargaming gimmick. It has a special spotter plane that instead of giving you 20% extra range, it gives you 30% extra range, but it also lasts a shorter time than the default spotting aircraft. So I've actually built for spotter plane duration, and I've even built eye in the sky to cut down the cooldown in half. So you end up with this kind of wonky ship where you spam a lot of spotter planes all the time with a fairly short cooldown to extend your pitiful range of 14 to a quite comfortable range of 18 kilometers. That's how far you can get with it. So when it's active, you have really good range, and because you have much better ballistics than a München, you can also utilize this range far better. But then when it's on cooldown, then you have 14 kilometers of range. And obviously, in ranked, where the maps are small and the distances are quite comfortable, this is not much of a problem. But if you get up-tiered and you have to fight on any sort of higher tier maps, 14 kilometers of range is hilariously anemic. Hilariously anemic. Like something like Okinawa with this range is just dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. But that doesn't mean that I haven't been enjoying it. I mean, I'm still have a good time with this ship, and even against up tiers, you gotta remember this is German HE, so your default pen is 38. You don't have to build the IFHE, and with 38mm of pen, you can of course farm, well, even the likes of Montana. You can farm all his armor. You won't face Montana, but you'll face Ivas and Georgias and all of this. So your HE performance is just very, very solid. It's consistent damage, and you got a pretty damn good chance of starting fires. The big weakness really is, well, you are hilariously squishy. A bit tankier than the München actually, because you have about 1.5k more health than the München, but the München has far better stealth. With a full stealth build, the München reaches a pretty absurd 9.4 kilometers, whereas this thing sits at, I think, 11.5 with the full stealth build. So München is just a more consistent ship, less reliant on all the gimmicks, whereas Weimar is very much a, you need to have your speed boost active to not be slower, you need to have your spotter plane active to not have terrible range, and like, you get they've kind of, it's weird, but lately I find that Wargaming, instead of balancing the gimmicks around the ship, like, hey, this speed boost is a bit too powerful, we should tune it down, instead of doing that, the Wargaming instead nerfs the entire ship's speed and keeps the gimmick the same. And then you end up with these ships that are very, very reliant on these gimmicks being active. Still though, I've enjoyed this ship. I've had a good time. In ranked, especially with the speed boost and with the acceleration mod, you can juke back and forth behind islands, you can just be super frustrating, and you can just farm, and as you can see, you can even citadel ships across the map quite effectively. And both the HE and the AP are really, really powerful. You have that improved pen, and with the flat arcs, it's quite easy to target the upper belts of ships with AP. So angled ships, you shoot HE, you penetrate basically everything you shoot at, and you have a good fire chance. If they get broadside, you switch to the AP, and you start smashing that upper belt for some huge German AP alpha damage. So I've been having quite a good time on this ship. I kind of like the playstyle in it. The guns are just very consistent, and well, I always enjoy consistent guns. And when it comes down to the YOLO, well, you got 6 torps on both sides, and they got fantastic torpedo angles. So most of the time, whenever I've been forced to YOLO into something, I manage to trade extremely effectively, which of course in ranked is a big advantage to have. And you can see I'm juking back and forth with this concealment. I'm trying to see if I can maybe get a shot on the Belfast if he starts shooting me, but the Belfast goes behind the island, so I just park here and I continue farming. And as you can see, AP on upper belt is what we're going for, and this Colorado is really not having a good time. The AA is actually quite a fair bit better than München's AP. Than München's AA. München only has 1 flak, whereas Weimar has 4 flak. Now, the range is the default anemic German 5.2 km range, which is obviously not that impressive for anti-air, but 4 flak and with 90% accuracy, a lot of low tier CVs don't really know how to dodge the flak, so they tend to fly into it quite a bit, so it's been far more successful at defending itself than the München has against those incoming strikes. Overall, I've had a good time in it. I will mention that you really don't want to be up-tiered in this thing, but if you're looking for a fun cruiser to play in ranked, Weimar has absolutely been it. I can Citadel ships consistently, you have the German 5.5 km Hydro, you're quite fast with the speed boost active, so you can rush down BDs. The AP performance is good, the HE performance is good, the torps are good. The AA isn't even that bad. The concealment could of course be better, but overall I find the ship to be quite enjoyable. Well, obviously you don't have the shell weight or the alpha of the York or the DPM of the München, but on the other hand, the flat arcs make it really effective, and the fast shell velocity makes it really effective at nailing basically any ship that you're dealing with. So, as long as you're not expecting a ship that up-tiers well, and it's certainly not something like a Belfast, something just like straight up overpowered, but I think the Weimar is fun. I would perhaps have preferred a ship that was just the speed of München without having to rely on speed boost, or maybe a bit more gun range without having to rely on the spotter plane. Basically, I wish it wasn't so tied down, so hampered by the gimmicks of the ship, and instead just the base ship itself was what they were aiming for, but sadly that's simply not the case. It is very, very reliant on the gimmicks. That's just the way the ship works. Belfast pushes in, smokes up. I'm tempted to turn out, he radars me, and then I'm like, you know what, whatever. We're just gonna go for this. We're gonna kill the Synop and we're just gonna go for this, because the Synop is being pressured by the rest of my team and hopefully won't have time to shoot me. And yeah, well, obviously he's going to be smashing me, but Belfast DPM not maybe that terrifying, and if I get within range of Hydro, I can easily kill him. Fire starting capacity very effective, Synop being burned. I already saw 1 fire and saw him damage corner earlier, so I know he's gonna die. I started 2nd fire as well, so I know for sure that he's absolutely dead, and I just start blind firing this Belfast. Shoot some AP, I angle in, he doesn't really get any citadels, he does break a turret though, and I'm just blind firing him to death here. He's finally within my Hydro range, and I finish off the Belfast quite comfortably. So, overall, I think the ship is... I'd say I give it my hesitant recommendation, in the sense that I think it's a fun ship to play. Don't expect it to be a monster, don't expect it to be some sort of super powerful ship, but fundamentally I think it's just pretty damn fun, and especially if you're playing bronze ranked, which I still am on my EU account, because I don't really play ranked on EU, I play it mostly on my Russian account, because I don't need the resources on EU. If you're looking for a ship for that, and you just want to have some fun with it, hard not to recommend Weimar. It is just fundamentally a lot of fun, so I think and surprisingly, I think they actually nailed it on that. I would prefer less gimmick reliance. I really don't like their recent design of making all these ships so heavily reliant on whatever gimmick they have, but despite that, a good experience. Let me show you guys my recommended build, because the recommended build for this ship is actually a bit weird. It is not quite the usual build that you would run, because, well, as I mentioned, this thing is gimmick reliant, which means the captain also has to build into these gimmicks a fair bit. Alright, as usual, let me start off with the equipment. A bit of weird things here. Obviously, if you have access to special upgrades, well, anything that boosts your consumables helps the Weimar a lot, because it is so consumable reliant. Spotting aircraft mod 1 gives you 30% spotting aircraft duration. Just helps you a lot because, as mentioned, your default range is garbage. If you can't afford this one, go for the main armament mod 1 to keep your turrets and torpedoes alive. Second slot, Engine boost mod 1. You're not particularly fast without your engine boost, so once again you want to build for it and you want to extend this duration. If you can't afford it, either go for hydro. If you don't have hydro, then go for engine room protection. Once again, consumables come first on the Weimar because that's the way the ship has been designed. Better dispersion on the main guns and acceleration. To be fair, there have been times where I could have lived if better or maybe survived with more health if I had steering gears, but considering how much time you just want to be hiding behind islands and dipping back and forth and acceleration juking, I think propulsion mod is just superior. Even if the rudder shift of 8.8 isn't really that comfortable for a tier 7 cruiser. Captain build wise, if you have Lutyens, he's obviously the best captain for a German cruiser, mostly because he has the main battery loader, which means that if you land 140 hits, you get a DPM buff, which is the best thing ever. Also, I have actually managed to proc Resilient on the ship a couple of times, so you can sometimes get value out of it, but obviously not a very consistent talent to go for. Build-wise, I would highly recommend Grease the Gears as the first one, because the default turretverse, it is a bit anemic and it is improved. If you don't want to go Grease the Gears, go for a gun feeder as the first one, because both the HE and the AP are very effective, and as you saw, you can comfortably Citadel cruisers in this thing, so you absolutely do want to be loading AP when the opportunity shows itself, but because the default reload is 8, you don't really have 8 seconds to wait before you switch ammunition type. Second point would be priority target. You absolutely want to be staying alive and you want to be knowing if people are shooting at you, because, well, you have no heal and you don't have a whole lot of health to tank with. Survivability expert. Actually, I would probably go this later. Go AR first and then build concealment. That would be the base build. Priority, AR, concealment. After that, build into survivability expert. Honestly, the health helps. Your health pool is just so low, getting this kind of bump helps you quite a bit, especially since the Cruiser 1 gives you 450 health these days, not 350. It means a fair bit more survivability on your Cruiser. After that, I'd probably go Pyrotechnician. Alternatively, you can go for Eye in the Sky. This cuts down your spotting aircraft's reload time by minus 50%, but on the other hand, also reduces the action time by minus 50%. It's a bit of a weird talent, but in the sense that your default cooldown on the spotter plane is so absurdly long, and I often find myself in situations where I wouldn't be able to shoot anything with my pitiful 14 km range. I've actually been enjoying Eye in the Sky with the whole build for it. This combined gives your spotter plane a 39-second duration with 102-second cooldown, or 103. So basically you can pop it every 1.5 minutes, about, well, 1 minute and 40, and you can pop the next one. So I feel it gives you more flexibility, because being the full, without it you're stuck for, well, almost 4 minutes. 3.5 minutes without having access to spotter plane, which means being stuck with this pitiful range, and if the map doesn't favor you, that might mean you're basically useless for 3 minutes, which isn't a nice experience. I mentioned that we build for the gimmicks a fair bit on this one, and that's the reason for going consumable enhancement. This gives you both engine boost and hydroacoustic search duration, 10% to both of them, which is one of the reasons why, of course, not just does my hydro last for 121 seconds, but my speed boost lasts for 257 seconds, which is more than 4 minutes, 4 minutes 17. So it kind of offsets the reliance on the engine boost by just making it last an absurdly long time. And finally, consumables specialist with the last point, provided you have 21. Like these last two, you can get away with having much less points on the captain, but if you have 21 points, then this one of course reduces the spotting aircraft reload time. Normally the reload time is even longer, but this takes away another 10% from that one. So once again, captain and equipment very much tailored for the consumables. Obviously, in a mention, you don't have to tailor for these things the same way, because the speed by default is consistent, the range by default is consistent, so you're not as reliant on this. And this is really my major complaint about the Weimar, is its reliance on its consumables. Still, I've been having a pretty good time in it, and I've been enjoying myself in the Weimar. It's been a fun ship to play, despite all of this weakness. Maybe I just like guns, good torp angles, and a fairly fast ship. I just like the opportunities it gives me, even though cruisers in general, especially without smoke or radar, aren't that powerful in ranked, but Weimar has been fun. So it gets my fun to play approval, I guess. And it's not like it's a bad ship. I mean, absolutely been able to carry a lot of games, because people kind of underestimate this thing coming at them with all those torpedoes loaded, and surprisingly you can smash quite a lot of ships as you push in. Obviously, don't always push in. You want to use terrain and you want to use your DPM as well. Still, now I'm rambling. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll talk to you guys next time.